Dante, can you take the garbage out, please? Dante was relaxing on the couch. Even though he's been lying there for about 2 hours, he feels as though he hasn't gotten any peace since he's walked in. He found himself resenting his mom, especially when she brought up the very insulting phrase, "When you're working a real job, then you can make the rules." She was a nurse that worked 12-hour shifts. She didn't consider Dante's little gas station job a real job. Him dealing with people for 6 to 8 hours at a time apparently wasn't serious enough for her to take into consideration that he may be very tired when he came home and would want a little bit of time for himself. Also, being in her presence with his room being remodeled, he found that conveniently she would call him more often than she would if he was out of sight, out of mind. "Mom," he said, sighing, hoping that he could win this case. "Is it possible that it can wait for a few hours and I can do it right before bed?" That was it. His mother whirled on him, with her hands on her hips, the gloves still wet and dripping from the dishes that she was washing. "Excuse me, but as long as you're staying in this house, you will do as I tell you." Dante turned his head to the side so she couldn't see him rolling his eyes. "Mom, I am 22 years old, and I do work." He waited for her response, knowing what would come next. "Oh, really? This job that you just got and you're probably gonna lose in about a week? You barely have any hours, and you work like 3 times out of the week. Not to mention, Dante," she said, sticking up a finger in his direction, it dripping wet still, "if you would do the things I asked you to do without me having to tell you, we wouldn't have these issues. I'm sorry that it feels horrible for you to want to sit back and relax when there's shit to do around the house. I know exactly how that feels. I'm the one busting my ass trying to bring in all this money to feed your ass. Most of the food that you eat, you don't pay for. Most of the electricity that you use, you don't pay for." Dante wanted to scream. His mother kept going on and on and on, as he made his way towards the back of the kitchen to just take out the garbage. He should have known better and just done it. Now he had to deal with her yapping for another hour straight. He understood where she was coming from, but at the same time, it's like she didn't want him to have any feelings either. He wished he could just go away. He can't go to his room, and he can't go to the bathroom. If he's in there for more than 15 minutes, she always has to use it. He couldn't hang out with his sister Cherish in her room because she was always doing her stuff and didn't want anyone in her room. Little Miss Princess seemed to have had it easier than Dante did. So Dante took the garbage and went outside and decided to stay out there a little bit longer. It was freezing at about 41 degrees. He still had his sports shorts on and his gas station work t-shirt. He sat out on the porch and just looked up at the sky. He wished right now he could be anywhere but here. As he looked up into the sky, he saw a full moon. Surrounding it were an array of stars that were so much farther away. He marveled at it, always wondering what it would be like if those stars were up close. How big do they really get? How hot are they? How bright are they? How old are they? Are the stars he's looking at now still up there? He looked back up at the moon, wondering what it would be like to sit on the moon, wondering if the dust up there was cold or glassy, what it felt like, what it would be like without a suit, and without needing to have oxygen. He blinked his tired eyes and rubbed his hands through his hair. He looked at the grass as it shimmered a weird color. Blinking again, he stared at the grass once more, and everything seemed normal. He was really tired. He was seeing doubles, and he confirmed this when he looked up at the moon. He corrected his vision and stood up. When he looked back up at the sky, he noticed something. That's strange. The moon looked odd. It was the full moon, craters, the white dusty parts. Yep, same old cheesy moon, but there was just something peculiar about it that he hadn't noticed before. He turned his body back around to face the direction. He swore he could hear his mom calling him. She's been calling him so much that he can hear echoes of her call even when she's not calling him. He chose to ignore. He would lie and say that he didn't hear her. He walked closer to the middle of the lawn and looked up at the moon some more, tilting his head from the left and right. That's it, he noticed. There's this weird shadow ring around the perimeter of the moon. It's as if the full moon is sitting in some type of halo. Very strange indeed, like a rainbowish kind of ring around the moon. He's never seen that before, and he decided that he was going to go on his phone and look it up to see if anyone else was witnessing this. It might just be the way the light's hitting it, but he's never seen that before. That night, as Dante was sleeping, there was a fierce wind that blew over their garbage cans and also felled some trees in the woods nearby. There was a deafening, thunderous noise, and Dante was jolted out of his slumber. His sister Cherish popped into his room before he had time to process what was going on. What are you doing in my room? Did you hear that? She said. Yeah, like this weird-ass thunder. You heard it too. Obviously, idiot, that's why I came in here. She looked out his window and towards the sky. I saw like this bright light. I was still up. I was on my phone and I thought that a transformer blew up or something. Dante just stared at his little sister's back. She stood at his window staring out of it as though she was searching for something. He sat up in his bed, still staring at her, waiting. And? He said. She turned back around to face him, still bathed in darkness. I don't know, Dante. It was just freaking weird. It scared the shit out of me. It's fine. I don't see anything. There's no rain. There's no lightning anywhere. Maybe it was just a freak occurrence. Dante rubbed his hand over his face. Or maybe it was just some car that crashed and the sound carried weird. Alright, I'm gonna go back to sleep. Can you get out of my room? Yeah, sure. Sounded like the sky broke open. Anyway, I'm gonna call Dad. You wanna talk to him? Maybe tomorrow, Dante replied, lying back down to sleep. The next morning, Dante saw that his mom had already left. He instantly felt better. He didn't have any classes today, and it was his day off. Yes, he would have the house to himself. But as he walked into the living room, he saw Cherish there with two of her friends. Oh, what are you still doing here? Don't you have class? I guess not, she said, pointing towards a TV. Hey, Dante, said Karen, one of his sister's friends. Steven was her cousin. He didn't even notice Dante as he was fixated with what was going on in the news. Dante went to the fridge to get a cup of water, and then he looked at what they were all staring at. There were reports of mass forest fires, floodings, and beached animals. There were also reports of strange animal attacks. Dante raised an eyebrow, wondering what the hell was going on. Maybe it had something to do with the loud noise from yesterday. He understood that it was loud enough and scary enough to make animals go crazy. But the flooding and the fires? What made it even more odd was the fact that these strange occurrences weren't just happening in the States. They were happening globally. That evening, Cherish left to go hang out with her friends. Dante was relieved to have the house to himself. He settled down on his PC to play some World of Warcraft. He was only 15 minutes in when he heard a weird sound. Removing one side of his headphones, he listened. It was coming from the back porch. He ignored it, thinking it was some stupid animal. Then he heard the noise again. For all he knew, it could be somebody trying to break in. He quickly got up, unmuted his mic, and told his friends on Discord that he'd be back. He thought about muting his mic, but he left it unmuted just in case something happened to him he could call out for help. It was weird, because what could happen? He's watched enough movies, and if anything could help him survive a strange situation that wouldn't be likely to happen but could happen, he wasn't going to take any chances. He turned on the light to the backyard porch and saw nothing. He looked towards the garbage and saw something moving inside there. There was no way Dante was going to go outside to check out what it was. He turned off the light in the kitchen, with only the porch light illuminating the porch and the garbage cans. He stood still, waiting to see what would come out. His wait was rewarded when he saw a baby possum stick its head out from the garbage. He carefully surveyed its surroundings, and then headed towards the grass. Jumping down from the can, it had something in its mouth, probably a piece of scrap. Dante was about to take his phone out of his pocket when there was a rush of a blur. The garbage can seemingly exploded in every direction. One hit the glass door of the back porch so hard that it cracked it. Involuntarily, Dante let out a little scream that was muffled by the chaos going around outside. He couldn't understand what was happening. Then everything was quiet. Garbage was everywhere. One of the cans was split in two. He doesn't know where the other half was. He looked to see what had happened. Did a meteor strike the earth? Breathing hard with his adrenaline coursing through his veins, he steadily peered outside to see what had caused the commotion. And the only thing that was standing near all the garbage debris was a deer, a young buck. He thought at first it was a wild dog. As a matter of fact, Dante could have sworn he saw some dog-like animal, and then it seemingly started to stand up on two legs, only to realize that the animal was getting up from a crouching position. Or at least that's what he thought he saw. Everything happened so fast. The possum was nowhere in sight, and if Dante believed in magic, he would think that the possum suddenly transformed into this deer. The deer just stood there, looking off into the distance. Then, towards the door. It didn't seem to see Dante, or maybe it did. The animal's eyes were glowing. After all, these animals can see in the dark. Dante, having turned off the lights, realizes this, but is so stricken with fear. Where the hell did this buck come from? The antlers on this young male were still very short, but even still, with it being such a young deer, it was powerful, and Dante was sure that this thing could take him on. After standing still for about 2 more minutes and looking back and forth from the tree line to another house, its ears pivoting this way and that, the deer decided to walk towards the other neighbor's yard. And this is where Dante felt like his knees were buckling, when he saw it move. You see, Dante wasn't really familiar with wild animals, but he knew, based on how they were portrayed in media, and having seen them in documentaries and on TV, how deer were supposed to move. This young buck did not move like a deer. As a matter of fact, it moved as though its legs didn't belong to it, like something else was wearing it as a suit, and didn't know how a deer was supposed to walk. The deer's head was held low. Its head wasn't even looking in front of it, in the direction where it should have been heading. Instead of walking in a straight line, the deer was sort of crab walking in a stiff method. The deer was walking almost diagonally or sideways. The best way Dante could think to describe it is that it was walking as though it were an 8-bit character. The herky-jerky motion sent shivers up his spine. What on God's green earth was happening? Dante figured that this animal was sick. That would explain its odd behavior. Who would he even call to take care of this problem? Whew, Dante sighed. That was freaking weird. Dante, having experienced that odd phenomenon, decided to get his phone out of his pocket. Where was his phone? That's it, it was back on the table, right beside his mouse. He picked up his phone, double-clicked the unlock button to gear up the camera, and went towards the side of the house. After all, that's where the deer would have been by now. But the deer wasn't there. However, it didn't matter, because something else caught his attention. There were other animals walking to and fro, and there was nothing wrong with this except that it was such an odd sight, seeing so many different animals in the cul-de-sac just chilling out. A raccoon jumped off of someone's SUV, parked on the outside of the cul-de-sac circle, and walked towards another house. Another deer, a female, was walking in circles. A fox was walking beside a younger deer. A random cougar ran past all these animals and into someone else's backyard. None of the animals were going in any certain direction. It's like they were all cold here and they were confused. Or they were running from something. Dante just stared. He remembered his phone and held it up and started recording. The animals didn't even seem to consider each other, at least not at first. One of Dante's neighbors drove in, and at first he thought it was his mom. She wasn't due back for another 5 hours. Then he realized it was his next-door neighbor. Mrs. Lynch pulled her car up and saw the sight before her. All these animals randomly moving to and fro in the cul-de-sac and throughout people's lawns. She just stopped her car, not knowing what to do. From his vantage point, Dante could see that Mrs. Lynch could get inside her driveway, but she looked like she wasn't taking any chances. She slowly backed up from whence she came and headed back towards the main road. More animals arrived, and some left, and after about 20 minutes, a few cop cars and animal control came. This was a very dangerous situation, and it was possible that all these animals might have rabies. But what are the chances that all of these animals would have rabies at the same time and be in the same place? Dante knew what rabies looked like, and none of these animals looked as though they were per se sick. The only one that he saw that looked sickly and weird was the deer that had been in his backyard. Soon as the police came out with their hands on their guns, ready to protect themselves and the civilians, and the animal control got their equipment together, the animals froze. Then they all took off in different directions back into the woodland areas. It was the strangest thing Dante's ever seen. I can't believe you have 56,000 views already. Damn. Good thinking, brother, said Cherish. Thanks. So what do you think about all this? Cherish stuck a candy in her mouth. I told you, it's what we saw earlier. I mean, I don't know what's going on, but the shit's got these animals going crazy. I'm gonna stay home tomorrow. That's what I'm gonna do. It's just weird, said Dante in response, still looking at the video that he took. The views were going up and the comments were coming in. A small number of the newer comments were complaining at Dante for having held the phone vertically. Dante hissed his teeth. Bitch, that's the most natural way to hold the goddamn phone. Ain't nobody got time to orient the hand when they're trying to film something that's gonna go away in a second. Cherish laughed. You just don't film vertically. Dante rolled his eyes. Well, I'm not no fucking film major. And it's a phone, it's not a goddamn camera. The natural way you hold a phone is vertical. I think it was perfect to get the subject matter that I wanted to get. Otherwise, we'd be getting, what, the curtain, the sofa, the sides of the cars, and things that we don't need to see. Cherish was now stuffing her face with leftovers from the fridge. You know, it's the natural orientation of how we see things. So some people, their OCD just goes crazy with that. Look, this is not a us thing. This is something that's been happening like all over with animals. There's a lot of people who said their pets just suddenly ran away. And one of my friends said her neighbor's cat threw itself through the window. Didn't even land on its feet or anything. Dante's eyebrows lifted up. Really? Yeah, shit's going ape. I'm telling you, Cherish said, wagging a finger. It all started from that big sound thing, that big voice of God. I think we're in the middle of an apocalypse. That night, everything seemed quiet. Dante was in bed, but he was roused momentarily when he heard his mom coming through the door. It was very late. He heard her sigh and drop her bag down. She put on the kettle, turned on the TV, and settled down for the night. It was her routine, and he knew that nothing was wrong with his mom. Apparently, she had no idea what was going on, or she just didn't think anything of it. Anything that made his mom anxious, anything that was out of the norm that she wasn't used to, and her routine would be messed up for sure. Her being calm and normal was the one comfort that he had, knowing that he had some sense of stability in his life despite everything that he saw earlier. That didn't last very long. In only a few hours of him having rested, there was another loud clapping noise, like a fast-moving rolling shutter, or someone flipping some really large pages in the sky. Dante saw some lights flickering through his eyelids, and he got up out of bed and looked out his window. The light flickering didn't seem to come from any of the street lamps, or any of the cars, or anything on the ground for that matter. He looked into the sky, and what he saw made him wonder whether or not he was still asleep, because there was no way what he was seeing was real. The sky that he's always known and been familiar with since he had been ushered into this world was flipping inside out. The ring around the moon that he had seen has now become separate from the moon, expanding into a shadow behind it. The moon was split in half. He was looking at the bright side of the moon, which still looked totally normal, and then out from behind it was its back end, the surface of which was a smooth, flat, clean-cut gray rock. Planets he's never seen before, like a time-lapse, were zooming to and fro in the sky, as if he was watching centuries and eons pass by in the blink of an eye. The passage of time up there in the celestial heavens did not match the passage of time down on the street in the cul-de-sac where he lived. Everything got faster in the sky, and then there was another loud bang. When Dante came to, he was being dragged. His body was thrown into something hard. He opened his eyes and saw that he was in the back of a pickup truck, surrounded by a bunch of other scared people looking up at something. A big burly guy hit the back of the truck, urging the driver of it to go quickly. Weakly, Dante sat up. A strange bear-like creature with two heads and some of its skin missing was chasing after them. It made a haunting cry that sounded like the combination of a bear roar, wolves howling, and a baby crying. Everything was wrong with the world. Dante closed his eyes. He lay in a fetal position, rocking back and forth, freaking out. All he wanted to do was wake up. The next time Dante woke up, he was in a facility, a very dark facility. It had overhead lights, but they barely did anything to light the area. It looked like a bunker. There were several people down there doing work, like research. They seemed busy. They seemed official. Dante called out for his mother and for his sister. There was no reply. A man walked up to Dante. "He's awake," he cried out. "Son, take it easy. I know this is a lot for you right now. You hit your head really hard. Take it easy. Take it easy. Don't try to speak. We're gonna get you some water, okay?" Dante rubbed his head. That's it. Maybe he was tripping. Maybe all of this that he just saw wasn't real. Was I dreaming? He said weakly. About what? The guy asked with a little quip. The world ending and the sky falling? No, you weren't dreaming about that, son, unfortunately. While the guy was talking to him, in between sentences, he was giving orders to others and taking papers. Dante looked around and saw some people pulling and pushing trays full of food and supplies. I need to find my sister and my mom. I'm sorry. I need to go. Once you're in here, you're not going out for a while. Not until we can make sure that the area is secure and know what we're dealing with. The best we can hope for is that your sister and your mom made it to another bunker and we can get in contact with them. When they're all settled down, we'll see if they have your sister and your mom there. But I'm sorry, I can't let you outside. You're risking everybody else's safety if I do that. Dante didn't cry. He didn't laugh. He didn't know how to react. After his head stopped swimming, he got up and tried to help the others. The best thing he could do was keep himself busy in the midst of this chaos. Funny enough, down here everything seems so normal. After the guy that initially took care of him got everyone together, Dante caught on with what was going on, or at least their best guess of a theory. It sounded like these crazy doomsdayers were saying that the world was ending, some kind of event where two galaxies or parallel dimensions collided. Two existences that were never meant to mix got too close to each other. That's why the animals in the skies were acting crazy. Apparently, Dante's reality, the reality of everyone else on this planet, in this solar system, in this universe that he knew, was being crushed and combined with that of another. This type of occurrence has its own side effects, either total annihilation, or hyper-evolution or de-evolution. Animals' DNA and that of people were being deconstructed. There are even reports of some people having turned into monsters. People gaining powers and abilities to teleport. People experiencing cannibalistic behaviors, forgetting how to speak. Bodies of different biological organisms turning inside out, and then evaporating into the sky. Dante saw pictures and some clips as he passed by. People using devices and talking over themselves. He saw so many horrific images, but some stood out to him, one in particular, and it showed up everywhere in the facility. A very large octopus-like creature with long tentacles and wings sticking out from the sides of its head or back or whatever that was supposed to be. Big question marks popped up around the depiction. In other depictions, this same creature was shown, except arrows were pointing away from that creature towards a much more colossal entity that was shadowed in darkness. Question marks were all around these depictions, as if the tentacle creature, who was supposed to be responsible for all this chaos, was supposed to fear that thing, whatever it was. It was amorphous. It was dark, and bigger than what we could even fathom. Maybe all of this is just myth. Maybe there's a perfectly logical explanation for what's going on. A perfectly logical explanation as to why a bear has two heads and has the voice of a crying baby coming from out of its large skull, missing the meat and skin off of it. Why a house cat was chasing a human with its head turned inside out and its teeth all around its body sticking out of its flesh. All of these vivid images flooded Dante's brain as he had been in and out of consciousness on that pickup truck. He worried for his sister and for his mother. And what he knew for sure is that whenever they went back up to the surface, if they would even survive to go back up to the surface, it would no longer be the world that he knew.